Hi guys, this is your girl Wakeji Kamore and welcome to Reflections by Wakeji Kamore. Today we are looking at chapter 27 of 2nd Chronicles. Again, Kama who just saw my chapter. By the way, this chapter is very short. It has only 9 verses. It is as short as the life of this king who we are going to read about today. If you haven't read it, please pause this recording, read it for yourself, understand what's happening here, and then may the Lord speak to you, and then you can come and listen to my takeout from this chapter. This chapter is very short. It's actually pretty short. It's about a king called Jotham. Jotham sasa nimeanza kuchanganyikiwa. Jotham was the son to a guy called Uzziah. And Uzziah is a guy who was such a good king, and then he became very proud. He entered into the temple of God, the Lord, and started burning his essence. And then when he was corrected, he didn't hear, and then he became a leper. And so his son, Jotham, started to rule because first his dad was already isolated, but now he actually became king. He became king when he was 25 years old, and Jotham died at the age of 41 years old, which is pretty young. I'm like, you have died very young. Verse 2 says that Jotham did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight. He did everything his father Uzziah had done, except that Jotham did not sin by entering the temple of the Lord. Let's just pause until there. So I remember when I read this chapter and I was like, okay, so this guy actually was such a good king, or rather he did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight. Why did he die so young? Like, what happened to him that he died so young? And from the chapter that I'm reading, like after I'd read the whole chapter, I knew that Jotham didn't do anything specifically wrong. Like, we don't see him, being specifically killed by the Lord, or the Lord, consequences of his sins catching up with him. So I was really confused about why he died very young. I really had many questions when I finished reading this chapter. And so I went on to do a little research online to just find out what was Jotham's failure? What was his failure? And this was his failure. It is at the end of that verse. It says, but the people continued in their corrupt ways. Let me read that whole verse again, just so that you can hear what he did and what he didn't do. So Jotham did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight. He did everything his father Uzziah had done, except that Jotham did not sin by entering the temple of the Lord, but the people continued in their corrupt ways. If you guys remember when we were reading the books of Judges, one of the things that we could see is that every time there was no judge, every time God had, the people of Israel would, do whatever it is that they feel like, and then God would raise a judge, and every time there was a judge, the influence or the impact of this judge caused the people of Israel to go back to the Lord until this judge died. And then they would go back to doing whatever it is that they saw fit. As a matter of fact, in the Bible in the book of Judges, there's a lot of the people of Israel did what they saw fit in their own eyes. And every time God would raise a judge, the judge would make an influence. So the purpose of the Lord raising a leader, the purpose of being a leader, the purpose of being a king, the purpose of being a judge was basically so that you can first be pleasing to the Lord yourself, do pleasing things to the Lord yourself, but also influence the people of God to do those things that are pleasing to the Lord, to influence the people of God against the worship of idols. Specifically, that was your role. So as Jotham here was, yes, he did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, and he rebuilt the upper gates of the temple of the Lord. He did some extensive rebuilding of the wall at the hill of Ophel. He built towns at the hill city. He constructed fortresses. He constructed towers in the wooden areas. And then he went to war against the Ammonites and he conquered them. And he became very powerful. And he was careful to live in obedience to the Lord his God. That is what we see in this verse. But he failed in doing the very thing that he was supposed to do as a leader. He failed in doing the very thing that he was supposed to do as a king. And that was to influence people from worshiping idol to worshiping God. When he was king, the people continued in their corrupt ways. The people continued to do what they thought was right in their eyes. So that means he didn't do he was just a leader who was a leader in leading people to battle, in constructing, in doing what was good in God's sight for himself, but he never led people to doing what was pleasing in God's eyes. So he failed as a leader. And I believe that is the reason why he did not reign for such a long time. Because you'd expect him to reign for, because he only reigned for 16 years. The guy died when he was 41 years old. I would expect him to reign for, 80 years, 70 years, 60 years, because he was a really good man. But he was a good man, but not a good leader. He was a good man, but not a good king who actually leads people in the spiritual, not just leading people to battle, not just leading people by building fortresses, but leading people in the spiritual as well. So yeah, that's what I've learned today. So for every leader that God sets up, it's not just being a good person. You've not been set up as a leader to be a good person. You've set up as a leader to be a good person and to influence people to become good people. It's not just for yourself. It's for the leading of other people. It's for impacting other people. It's for influencing other people. Yep, that's the lesson that I learned from this chapter. Thank you so much for listening, and see you tomorrow.